My friend Jordan has been a cop for quite some time now. Something has been bothering her for the last month or so. And, recently, we finally got her to tell us. The week she began acting sullen and distant, she revealed she received a call about a late night break in at a local church. A middle aged woman in a suit and an older man dressed like a priest stood waiting outside when she and her partner arrived at the location. The two were both visibly agitated, and the priest quickly told her about the broken glass they'd found around the side of the church. There wasn't supposed to be anyone present that late at night, so they knew it wasn't an accident of some kind. The nearby community had several large and modern churches, and this building was no exception. The building was more like a compound than a church, large enough to provide numerous and varied services. A series of huge windows had her immediately concerned about the safety of approaching the building. Sighting the broken glass from afar, she returned to the car and called for backup. Another car arrived shortly, bringing two more officers and a canine unit. They checked the side of the building, and then, they never show this part on television, she told me with a sigh. She grabbed a broom and had to sweep up the broken glass so that the dogs wouldn't hurt their feet on the way in. With that done, they left one officer out by the cars, and she, her partner, and the officer handling the canine proceeded inside. They immediately disliked the interior. The church was clean, white-walled, and open, but that was exactly the problem. The large open chamber formed what she called a fatal funnel, leaving the three of them extremely vulnerable if there did happen to be somebody still inside. They listened from outside for several minutes, but the dog remained calm, and no sounds came from inside. After a couple more checks through the windows, they moved in, finding the large community area empty. The three of them quickly chose better positions near doors to the rest of the compound. It was there that Jordan first noticed the odd smell. It was industrial, somewhat, definitely chemical, and familiar, but difficult to identify. The dog happily sniffed around, but made no alerts. They proceeded into the sanctuary proper, checking between the pews with flashlights one row at a time. The odd smell was weaker there, and a thorough search of the altar and tiny back hallway found nothing. They gave the room one last scan and then closed the large doors, sealing the room behind them. The other direction in the church led deeper into a nest of hallways. Clearing corners and securing rooms one by one, they moved through a kitchen and what looked like classrooms. The further they went, the stronger that odd smell grew. Nearing the end of the complex, they began seeing construction equipment and painting gear. In one of the half-finished rooms at the end of the hallway, a ladder led up into the building's attic. Here, then, was another major hurdle. She sent her partner, the rookie, up first. There were a few tense moments as he kept low and scanned the cluttered expanse with his flashlight, but nothing seemed big enough for a vandal to hide behind. With the dog still calm, she followed her partner up, and they did a slow search to confirm that the attic was empty. Done with the whole building, they returned to the point of entry. One of Jordan's on-the-job fears had always been clearing a building, telling the owners it was safe, and then finding out later they'd missed something, leaving the poor people to walk obliviously into danger. So, she waited at the end of the hallways just a moment longer, thinking over the layout of the building. She called up the officer outside on her radio, to ask if there was a basement. And that was the moment someone burst out from one of the rooms they'd cleared. Caught off guard, the large man was an easy tackle, although he seemed terrified. He kept babbling about being punished for his sins, and he kept fighting to escape. So it took both her and her partner to cuff him and convince him to calm down. By the time he lapsed into a confused silence, the strange smell from the hallways had grown overpowering. Curious, she proceeded with her partner into the room from which the man had come. A large black square now sat, clearly visible in the back corner, a hidden door ajar above it. Her flashlight showed an edge lined by duct tape and a freshly painted set of white steps. She carefully climbed down into a small tunnel. Her radio came alive, and she quickly turned the volume down. And she was glad that she did, because the canine handler told her that the man they'd cuffed was babbling about people down there. On edge, she and her partner moved into a low, wide space set in the heavy foundations of the building. Within, they found a series of medical machines hooked up to a large block of what looked like concrete, or perhaps heavy plaster, also painted white. Little tubes curled up and along the top of it, while large tubes entered the lower half, all filled with various unidentifiable substances. Warily, she cleared the corner of the huge block and confirmed that the room was empty. There were no people, despite what the intruder had claimed, and the smell of plastic and chemicals was worse than ever. She guessed that the duct tape around the trapdoor had been keeping the smell sealed in. It was then she noticed dozens of little white protrusions from the concrete. Something about their arrangements seemed familiar. It was only when they moved slightly that she recognized them as the protruding tips of 50 or 60 fingers, all painted white. It took a moment for the truth of what was happening to sink in. She understood almost immediately that there were people encased in cement before her, but it took her a few more seconds to comprehend what the machines, tubes, and wires hooked up to the block were for. These people weren't being killed. They were being kept alive. In a flash, she was on her radio warning the officer outside, but he failed to respond, and she and her partner bolted back up the tiny stairs and out through their point of entry. By the cruisers, they found the officer with a knife sticking from his leg and his wrists bound. The priest and the middle-aged woman in a suit were nowhere to be seen, and both their cars were gone. The police are conducting a search, certainly, but the two have yet to be found. She told me that they're keeping the story under wraps while the investigation is ongoing, but she trusted her friends with the tale because she had to tell somebody. The physical details, she said, felt distant, like a horror movie. But it was the aftermath that kept her up nights. The rescue staff had carved out the survivors one by one, freeing them from the concrete block with heavy tools, careful cutting, and constant medical care. Each of the young men and women freed from the block had been filthy, burned all over by chemicals from the material they'd been stuck inside, and emaciated beyond description. Corpse-like, charred, and leaking all sorts of horrendous fluids. They'd seemed hardly human. It was insane to think that this ongoing torture had been happening beneath the feet of children attending Sunday school. Each freed victim gave varying answers as to the time they'd been abducted and imprisoned. The most recent had only been encased for a month, and she was grateful for rescue. Each successive captive had been buried alive several years before the next. The oldest two had been trapped in concrete for 18 and 22 years, respectively. The part that kept Jordan up at night, she told us, after downing a shot, was that, once freed from living entombment, they'd both begged to be put back inside again.